Good evening, everybody. I'm Tom. I'm a grateful alcoholic. And it's a pleasure and honor to be participating in this meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. Welcome to all the new people. I hope you find here what I've found here. I started drinking in high school. I was invited to one of those upper class parties. It was a typical high school party. There was a keg in the center of the room, and all the guys were lined up on the wall on the right. The girls were on the left. And I floated over, grabbed my first beer, and went back to my wall and held that up. Down that beer, went back for the second beer, went back to my wall. By the third beer, I was the bartender. And I was pouring one for you and one for me. And I absolutely love the effect produced by alcohol. I can tell you that at this time, I didn't know it at the time, but I was afraid of everything back then. I was afraid of the girls to talk to. I was afraid of the big, tough football players. I was afraid of gangs, and we didn't even have them back then. But by that third beer, man, I was chasing those women around the party. I was talking to all those big, tough football players. They were my best friends, and I absolutely loved it. And I was to do that night everything I was going to do for the next 10 years of my drinking. I fell down, I threw up, and I was thrown out. And then I got to practice throwing up all night. And that next morning, I went to my swim workout, and I was a swimmer in high school, and I was just praying to God to help get me through this workout, and I was doing those flip turns and thought I was going to throw up, and I just kept rolling, it seemed like. And I hit that locker room where there's... And got showered and was heading home, and a couple guys come running up and said, "Tom, we saw you at that party last night. Man, you were great. You were so funny. We're going to another party tonight. You want to come?" I said, "Sure." And I did that resolve many, many times after that. I don't know. I had a lot of different philosophies in life. One, I figured you'd make enough money to do whatever you wanted to do in life, or two, you get paid to do whatever you want to do. And in my senior year in college, with about 4 classes to go, I dropped out, thinking I was a little more smarter, unique, and different than the rest of them. And they said, "Tom, see the world and join the Navy." And I said, "Not." Locked up on a boat with a bunch of guys. A couple gals I was dating, though, they were flight attendants with the airlines. They said, "Tom, you should be a flight attendant. You would have a lot of fun." And I believed them, and I applied with several airlines, and I became a stewardess. I was a minority, a straight white male, and I was getting paid to hop on an aircraft and fly from one city to the next, serve a few cocktails, a couple meals, and then get off and party my brains out. And this is back in the good old days. This is 1976. Back then, sex was safe and marijuana and cocaine were non-habit forming. And times have changed. And I was proceeded to party my brains out for the next 10 years. I did have a slight interruption at that point. When I was the age of 25, my mom came down with terminal cancer, and she brought up, we were able to do a little men's thing before she passed away, and we talked about our lives, and we went over the sad times and the good times, and we laughed about all the times we had. And before our conversation was over, she said, "Tom, I want you to watch your drinking. You have alcoholism in your blood." I had a grandfather and a couple uncles that were alcoholic. One left a wife and 8 kids and was never seen again, and the other one was a merchant marine who never drew a sober breath in port. And before she said that, she goes, "I just want you to watch your drinking." And after she passed away, I got to tell you, I was never more enabled in my life. Everywhere I went, people had a beer for me. They kept some vodka in the refrigerator or something for me. And everywhere I went, poor guy lost his mom. And I drank hard and long. So if you're going through a time like that, I want you to know that alcoholism is not a cure for cancer, and it certainly doesn't bring back the dead. And the worst part about it is it doesn't make the pain go away. What it does, it just postpones it. Because every time you sober up again, you got to go through all that grief. I watched my drinking for the next year or so, and I started getting more problems at work. And all of a sudden, I had an introduction to Alcoholics Anonymous through one of those tune-up centers. The company sent me to one of those care units, and they feed you a bunch of vitamins, and they give you a big book for $35,000. They keep coming back as long as you got that good insurance. And they said, "And by the way, go to some of them A&A meetings." And I went to those meetings. I got to tell you, I went to them, and my problem was drinking, so I quit drinking. I continued to snort a little cocaine and smoke pot on occasions, but eventually I stopped going, and I spent the next 3 years of sheer hell going through Chapter 3 of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, unbeknownst to me, because I didn't read the book, I didn't have a sponsor, and it's hard to work the steps if you don't do that. And by the age of 29, I had alcoholic liver hepatitis, bleeding ulcers, and yellow jaundice, and I was beaten into a state of reasonableness. And I think God answered that one prayer that he always does around here. And I said, "God, help me." With no reservations, no deals, or whatever. I ended up coming in there in June 25th, 1984. And for some reason, I stuck around and I did what was suggested. And I followed a man who followed a man who followed God. And today I can tell you that I'm not the person who walked into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. I probably wouldn't want anything to do with it at that point. But today I can tell you I have an unbelievable life. I have a wealth of friends in this room, and it's just incredible. I got to tell you, in a year and a half sober, I had done a lot of things wrong in the program. I got involved with a girl in the first year, moved in with her, turned my will and my life over to her as I understood her, and moved from St. Louis to Los Angeles. And I think God works with our character defects at times, but it got me exactly where I was supposed to be when I was supposed to be there. And I can tell you that with a year and a half sobriety, I had a bad week. I lost a job I'd had in the airlines for 10 years. We went on strike. And on Wednesday, I got a letter from the IRS, and on Friday, she threw me out. Didn't want to be around this bum. And my home group thought that was funny. They said, "You're right where you're supposed to be. Keep coming back." Sound good, Tom? And I'm really pulling my hair out, and I'm going crazy, and it's absolutely insane. And I'm just thinking, why me? I'm working a good program. Check out these other ones. And I went to one of those meetings, and here's that 90-day wonder, "Hi, my name's Bob, and my life's absolutely perfect, having worked all 12 steps in their entirety. Never had it so good. Matter of fact, the wife loves me, the boss thinks I'm great, and all this stuff, and I'm ready to kill this guy, and I probably would have if you hadn't been sitting in that wheelchair." And it said, that little brain cell I didn't fry came flickering on. It said, "Do the legwork." And I started doing that, and I became willing. And I got to tell you, I went from being a flight attendant into the construction industry, and you really can't get from where I was at, pouring coffee for a living, to where I am today as a project manager doing, I built several of the large hotels here in charge of budgets that are unbelievable. And to me, it just doesn't make sense, except for the fact that I've had a loving God in my life that has worked this thing, and I've showed up and did a few simple suggested steps. One of the things I encourage everybody to do is get really involved. When I was about 2 years sober, I got a commitment sponsor in Los Angeles who volunteered me for everything that opened up in Alcoholics Anonymous. Next thing you know, I'm on a convention committee. I got this, and I got a panel at Warm Springs, and I got to tell you, that was a real turning point. It got me from around the program and into the program. If you're not doing the things and buying the whole package like we've heard before, then you're missing out, and you're going to miss out on a lot. I'm going to end it with this one thing. There's a couple of things I wanted to say, but I had a problem with this God thing when I got here, and my sponsor laughed and said, "You think you're having a problem with God? You should see the problem he's having with you." And I didn't really buy into it a whole lot, being he just walked away too. And I was watching Star Wars one more time, and I get into that science fiction stuff, and Luke was going after the battle stars, and he's shooting them up, and I'm right there with him, and it said, "Let go, Luke, and use the Force." And I said, my God, that's this program. And you have a choice on a daily basis what you want to plug into. You can plug into the positive side of the Force, which is love and care for other human beings, and putting somebody else's needs ahead of your own. Or you can plug into the dark side of the Force, which is the selfishness, self-centeredness, and where's mine, and haven't I done enough? If you do the positive side of the Force, I believe that will unlock the keys to the kingdom. The last thing I got to share is something that my sponsor insisted I talk about every time I share, and that is I was involved with this program up there at Warm Springs in California, and today I have something similar in the prison committee. And as I was driving along meeting some of my biker buddies up there, I was listening to the radio, doing about 85, listening to the mellow songs along the coast. And all of a sudden, this ad came on for a new ride up there, and it went Ninja. And the ad went something like this. "Ninja, the black belt of roller coasters. You can't see the track. You don't know when the next turn's coming. You'll never know when they'll throw a loop in there." And I said, my God, that's this program. You hop on this thing, you're getting 30, 60, 90 days, and you're feeling great because you're getting your health back. You're probably putting a few bucks in your back pocket. And you ride along, and it's getting higher and higher, and somebody taps you on the shoulder and says, "Hey, buddy, read the book." You go, "Shut up, man. I've got a great program here." Then she sits down, and you go, my God, what a spiritual program indeed. I love sobriety. And all of a sudden, it goes... and it's going downhill faster. You go, my God, what happened? And he said, "Hey, buddy, read the book." And you're saying, "Shut up back there." And all of a sudden it goes right and it went left and it felt like you just tore your heart out. You're going, my God, what happened? And he said, "Read the book." You go, "I lost it on the last turn." And then there goes a loop, and there goes a job out the window. But hang in there, because you know what? This life is not about not drinking. It's about getting comfortable on this ride of sobriety. If you don't drink and you take the steps and you do this, what your program and sponsor suggests, you're going to get comfortable on that ride. Eventually you're going to have another loop, and there goes another job. Eventually you're going to go, and screw it, here we go again. But just hang in there, because eventually you'll come back uphill, and somebody's going to sit down in front of you. You know what you're going to say? You're going to tap on the shoulder and say, "Hey, buddy, read the book and take the steps." Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Minnie, and I'm an alcoholic. And I get nervous doing this. And I'm sure that there's something back here that I'm supposed to say that's supposed to be profound, but I don't know what it is right this minute. I feel privileged to be a member of Alcoholics Anonymous and very grateful to be sober. 10 minutes. I can't even have breakfast in 10 minutes, but we're going to try. I'm going to give you a thumbnail sketch of what it was like, what happened, and what it's like today. I was born a very long time ago in New York City, and and I didn't drink. My family didn't drink. They were immigrants. My parents are. My mother was in the Holocaust. She was a Holocaust survivor. She went into a concentration camp with 5 children and came out with 3. That's all we know. That's all anybody talked about. No one spoke about it for the first 17 years of my life. My parents loved me. I didn't feel it. They were really good people. They weren't very present because of all the trauma they had been through. My father was the hero. He got my mom and 3 children out of this concentration camp, and he put them on his back, and he swam 13 miles down the river. And as extraordinary as that sounds, that's really true. And no one talked to me when I was growing up, and I don't blame any of them for my alcoholism. I'm just giving you a little background sketch. The background is she threw out my favorite toy, and I spent $10,000 in therapy talking about my teddy bear. And that really helped my drinking a lot. It's a life, you know? And I felt very peculiar. I felt very alienated. I felt very alone, and I felt very unique. And so I became the quintessential overachiever. I was the first woman student council president of my school. I was a varsity cheerleading captain. I was having the club. See, it's the opposite ends of the same stick. It doesn't matter if you become a goody-goody or a baddie-baddie. It's the same thing. And what it is you're screaming for love. And alcoholics are a bunch of people looking for love in all the wrong places. I had a shrink say a profound thing to me one time. He said, you know, Minnie, love doesn't cost as much as you're willing to pay. I thought, oh, please. He didn't have my childhood. What, are you kidding? I'll pay anything. I have no choice. There's no choice in that. I need it. I have to survive. I will pay anything, and I will pretend to be anybody so that you love me. I will sell my soul down the river for your approval. But not today. That was then. Anyway, I didn't drink in high school. I was too busy overachieving and compensating for being very, very ugly. I had this really big nose and people made fun of me. Another $10,000. My character defects have been very expensive. I didn't just, you know what I mean? I mean, they really cost me. And anyway, so I'm like 19 and I can't take, you know what? I want to tell you something. I know that I'm alcoholic, not by how much I drank, but what I feel like when I'm sober. That's how I know. I don't know how you know, but that's how I know. I can't stand it. And that's why I kept going back and back and back. I don't like the taste of booze. I don't like the look of booze. I don't like the color. I don't like the glasses. I don't like all those things that go with it. I only like the feeling that it gives me, which is it takes away my fear, and I will pay any price to be loved, and I will pay any price to be fearless. I like being fearless more than I like anything else in the world, because I'm fear-ridden. I had 12 years of sobriety, and I couldn't rent a car. I got that panic thing, and I was too ashamed to tell anybody about it. So I took a limo. Thank God my husband doesn't get my credit card. I pay for it. And then eventually I told someone about it. But that's not the issue. The issue is why. It's, you know, all of that fear. Anyway, none of the lights have lit up. Oh, good, I'll talk faster. Okay, so here's what happened. I'm 19. I'm now a go-go girl. I want to be a dancer, right? My big dream, be a dancer, be a dancer. So now I'm a go-go girl. I leave college. I have a full-paid scholarship at Adelphi University. I have a nose job. Those 2 things help. And I can't stand it. I can't live in my own skin. I just can't do this. So I become this wild go-go girl person running through the bars, and I meet him. Now, he happens to be 42 and gay. Hey, they can't all be gems. Any price for love. Remember that? The any price for love? And I marry him, and we have this wild time. I marry my dorm mate's father. Anyway, and we have this like wild time, very distracted. You give it, an alcoholic needs a couple of things. They need a lot of booze, drugs is a good thing too. Sort of an little adjunct to keep the drink going. Just as an adjunct, not as a primary, just an adjunct so you can drink more. They need a lot of attention. They need to pretend in some way or fantasize that they're loved. And they need to pretend that they care about you. And that's what I did. I pretended that I cared about you. I couldn't give a flying fuck. I pretended because I needed your approval. I was going to die without it. Those are my survival skills. I mimic and become anything that you want me to be so we can have another day, because the other thing I need as an alcoholic, as a drunk, right, is I need distraction. I got to get distracted. I cannot sit in my own head, in my own heart, in my own being, with my own soul, by myself, anywhere, at any time. I can't do it. Impossible. I got to be loaded and I got to be moving. And those are the requirements. And that's what I did. I got loaded and I kept moving. It's a few drinks, it's a few husbands, it's a few careers. None of it matters. It's just a cycle. It's the cycle of I don't want to feel. I was a slave to my emotions. They ran my life. I didn't want money. I didn't want power. I didn't want prestige. I didn't want any of those things at all. I didn't want material things. I just wanted to feel good. If I could just feel good, I could do anything. It's hard. Because now I've been diagnosed with a lot of other stuff. I've been diagnosed, big name things, like those big therapeutic names, borderline personality, clinically depressed, and bottom line, I have acute alcoholism. I'm a drunk. I don't want to do life on life's terms. I don't want to be responsible. I don't want to be accountable. I just want you to fix me and make me feel good, and then I'll do whatever I need to do to make it through another day. And that's not the way life works, and that's not adulthood, and you can't take that and get sober with that. Anyway, I lived a wild life, and I didn't really care, and at Christmas I was out partying, and my husband was home, and I got a telephone call that he had hung himself, and I got sober for a couple of days so that I could show up at the funeral and not be loaded. Not because of my level of care and concern, my level of drama, and I knew how to be straight because I needed to pretend to you that I cared. That's what I needed to do. And then I went on the wild ride, and I would sober up. I became a professional dancer, blah, 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 blah. And, I got to the level that everybody dreams about, or seemingly dreams about. The contract at Universal Studios, the big mansion, the Rolls Royce, blah, 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 blah. Number one, I can't drive it, it's too big, I bang into things. Number two, I can only drink and I'm paranoid, so I have to keep all the doors closed. I can only, one room that I can drink. I can't do all those other rooms, and I hate to clean because I'm Jewish, and I just, it didn't work. None of that stuff really worked for me. And I just can't do all that stuff, but I can drink and I can pursue what it is that I have to pursue in order to maintain my habit. And my habit costs a lot of money. It's expensive. And so I do the next thing. I find the very, very rich boyfriend who has no idea that I'm loaded. Not that bright, huh? And I play him, and that's what I do in my life. I trample people. Alcoholics leave a trail of blood. We just leave this emotional trail of blood. And I trample people, and in one of my trampling moments, Richard Riley's wife at the time told me to come over to the house. I have 1 minute left. I really have to talk fast. Okay, so here's the deal. And I came into the program in February 27th, 1979. I got sober in 1985. Little glitch in there. And I couldn't get sober. And nothing that I've said before this means anything. This is the only thing that means something. I am the kind of person that loved AA. I love the program. I love the people. I love the steps. I love the book. I love the camaraderie, and I could not get sober. So that's my story. Because I went out. I had everything I found. I did everything in AA. I got it all back. And of course I lost it. None of it mattered. And I had my nose pressed against the window of the club, at the Triangle Club, and I could not get sober for 4.5 years, and I wanted it more than I wanted anything else. And this is what happened to me, and this is all that's important. I went to speak to somebody, and I was so crazy at this point that he needed visual aids, and he drew 2 circles, and he labeled one the world and one AA, and he looked me straight in the eyes, and he said, if God gives you a place to sleep and food in your belly, is that good enough? And when you're emotionally devastated and tonally insane, you say yes. And I said, yes, it's good enough. And I don't know what would have happened if I said no. And he looked at me and said, Minnie, you like AA? I said, yes. He said, you got a sponsor? I said, yes. He said, you read the book? I said, yes. He said, you did the steps? I said, yes. He did an inventory? I said, 45 pages. He said, you trust your sponsor? I said, yes. Can you stay sober? I said, no. He said, believe in God? I said, yes. He said, going to make it through today without another drink? And I said, no, Don, I'm really not. I'm really not. And he looked at me, and he took out a piece of paper with 2 circles. He put one the world and one AA with a green crayon. And he said, you're like me, Minnie. You live in the world and you go to AA, right? And I said, yeah, Don, that's what I do. And he said, you're going to die that way. You don't have a shot in hell. And I just looked at him. It was sort of devastating, these piercing eyes. And he drew a big circle and a little one in the middle. And the little one was AA, and the outside was the world. And he said, from this day forward, you have forfeited the right to live in the world. From this day forward, you live in Alcoholics Anonymous, and you go to the world. And then you come back to Alcoholics Anonymous. Did you get that? And that was my moment. And it went click. And I went home, and I hit my knees. And I can't say that, because I think you're not supposed to have bad language up here, because everybody's dressed up. Anyway, I hit my knees and I said, bring it on, because I knew I was running from the pain of sobriety. I knew it. And you know what? I had a spiritual experience. The obsession was lifted. I never looked back, and I'm having the time of my life. And the only thing I have to do is be more than I am in Alcoholics Anonymous and in life. I have to make a difference. I have no choice. Thank you.
My name is Clancy Immisland, and I'm an alcoholic. I'm very glad to be here tonight. I had a hell of a time getting here. I was driving to the airport. I was at work today down at Skid Row, and I was driving to the airport, and I got to Sepulveda, to the better part of town, and I stopped in. I had a few minutes. I stopped in front of a liquor store to went in and got a Coke, a can of Coke, and said a few words and came out and got in my car and drove away and got to the airport. And I got to the airport and I realized, I'd been in having a Coke, somebody had stolen my briefcase out of the car, which was all right, except my ticket was in it. And so I went over to the ticket counter. I didn't leave a hell of a lot of time, and there's big long lines of people, mopes from other places. And I convinced one of the clerks my case was different. And I went through all kinds of procedures I've got receipt here for a lost ticket. And I kind of threatened the guy. I told him, I said, I've got boxer shorts on and I know how to use them. But I finally just got out of the plane in the nick of time. I'm very glad. Then it turned out not to be nick of time at all. It was a half hour late, so it was all right. But I'm glad to be here. I'm always glad to find places where people are enthusiastic about AA, and I'm glad to see this meeting's off to such a good start. A fellow I sponsored, Johnny H., was here last week and told me what a good group it was, and I'm glad to be here. I started a group similar to this a number of years ago with significantly less impact than you've had. I was about 5 years sober, and I had a feeling that I'm ready to be a secretary of a group. I've got a lot to offer. And the biggest group in Los Angeles at that time was the Brentwood group, and they selected their secretary through a steering committee. A few people got together and made a decision. And I knew one of the people on this committee, so I said, how about mentioning my name and get me a secretary? He said, okay, I'll do it. And so the next day I came back, I said, well, did I get elected? He said, no, actually, your name died for lack of a second. I realized there was not a big tide to, and so a couple of days later, a week or two later, somebody said, that little Ohio Street meeting hall, the Tuesday night meeting just went bad. Why don't you start a meeting over there? I said, yes, I will. And I rushed over there and I rented the thing, and I started a meeting, and I wrote a little format. I was working in an advertising agency at that time, so that afternoon I wrote a format, kind of just banged it up, which I thought would be a good idea. And I had 9 or 10 tattered followers, and we started a meeting there, and had a speaker come in, and 2 10-minute speakers like we're having tonight. And at the end of the meeting, I gave a few announcements. I could just see the groundswell starting. The next week, we had about 14 people. The next week, we had about 19 people. And then I think I offended some people with my announcements. We were back to 9 people. Yes. They weren't ready for truth, I'll tell you. And at the end of a year, they had about 30 people there, maybe 30 people, coming regularly, plus others. And I thought to myself, you know, a lot of groups would have an election at the end of a year, but this would really be unfair to these people because they're good people, but they don't have the focus I have. So I decided to just quietly sacrifice myself, and I stayed on as secretary. At the end of 2 years, we're up to about 60 people and doing quite well. And I thought, God, we should have a, well, not quite. It's like dealing with an emerging African nation. I mean, they know the words, but they don't quite have it here yet. And I thought, I don't care how inconvenient it is to me. I'm going to stay on as secretary. About 2 or 3 months later, I was sitting back in the kitchen in Ohio Street. I'd selected a bad speaker, so I was sitting in the kitchen not listening. I was reading a book or something, and some guy came up to me whose life I had saved, incidentally, and said, "Are we ever going to have an election around here?" I said, "Why? The group is growing. We're doing good. We've got the best tradition observations in the country. We're doing fine. Why do you have an election for?" I said, "Well, don't be upset." He said, "It's just that people in other groups will say, 'Are you ever going to have an election?' If we had an election and voted you in, then nobody could say a word." I said, "That's a good thought." So I had an election, and they swept me out of office. I didn't care. I still got the ballots home. That was 1965. Over the years, I'm no longer the secretary. You'll have that feeling someday. I'm the founder. And to tell you what a good job I did to establish that meeting, even after I got out of office, it really took off. And now it's around 1,000 people every Wednesday night. I was there last night. The largest and most successful group in the world, I guess. And I'm not the secretary, and I don't care. But I sit in the middle, I'm the founder. And during the meeting, I give little signals. Nobody pays any attention, but it cheers me up. And at the end of the meeting, I stand in the back, and I was relatively well dressed because I'm coming from work, like I am tonight. And people bring newcomers up to me. They say, "This is Clancy I. He flies all over the world and talks in other countries, and he started this group, and he's been sober well over 40 years." And they're like, "Oh." And I try to maintain a certain persona. I say, "Hello there. Welcome to our group. I hope you brought your problems tonight. Many folks leave them here." Sometimes you can spot diabetics. They go into a coma. Once in a while, some boob will come up who doesn't know who I am, apparently. "Hey, buddy, can you give me a ride back over to the VA psycho ward?" And the great thing about Alcoholics Anonymous, that is all such a wondrous thing, which I'll talk about in a minute, is that you can think whatever you want to. You never have to worry about what you're thinking. You can stare right in his beady little eyes and think, "What? Give you a ride to the VA psycho ward? My God, there's 1,000 people in this room who need action desperately. There's one who has given all, year after year after year. I'm a vessel that's been tipped and dripped out. I'm not just a guy standing around looking good. I'm Clancy I from up in the sky, helping people throughout the world." You know? Now I can think that as long as I say, "Okay." And and the miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous is after you drop the puke off at the VA and I drive home, My head says, "Oh, Clancy, is there no end to your goodness?" That's reassuring. At the Pacific Group, we bought a little thing called the poop sheet, which has thoughts and ideas and so on. And yesterday they had a good little thing, and they said, many newcomers wonder what structure is. We always talk about the structure of the group. The best single structure is doing what you ought to do, when you ought to do it, whether you feel like it or not. That is almost a cornerstone of sobriety in my life, and it took me many years to achieve it. Incidentally, I want to thank our 10-minute speakers who did an excellent job. Almost made me hate to get up here. They were both so verbal and, well, actually I dozed off. I don't know what the hell I said. I mean, I got up early this morning. Really fine, and several people have mentioned tonight that they saw this A&E special Monday night. Don't take up a love offering. I had to pay extra for this second ticket. Anyway, yeah. But I haven't seen it yet, so I know about it because my wife told me about it, but I haven't seen it because I was up in Idlewild talking to a painting up there, you know. But I hope to see it this weekend. But it's an interesting thing because, you know, 2 or 3 months ago, the World Service Office called me up from New York and said they're doing a special on AA. But would you mind being interviewed in Los Angeles? I said, no, I don't mind. And so they came out and set up at Ohio Street. That building is the whole south side of it, a lot of windows and glass. And they waited till the sun was pouring through in the afternoon, and they sat me in front of it, so all you could see was a silhouette, I guess. And they set up this camera. And I'm a strong believer in anonymity. Because of my work, I'm on television a lot, and I'm in the newspapers a lot, but not never as a member of AA, because that's absolutely verboten, I believe. But, you know, I knew this was going all over the country to thousands and thousands of homes. And as he started to roll that camera, I just had a terrible temptation, just kind of go. I fought it off, but it was nip and tuck. But it's interesting. He asked me some questions that apparently they didn't use on the air. They used some other schmoozing I did, but the questions he asked me I thought were very impressive. I didn't give very good answers to them, I guess, which is why they didn't use them. But he said questions. The first question he asked me, usually they ask you questions, puffball questions, like, well, how many chapters do you have, and how many people are there? And he said, why is it that some alcoholics can get sober without AA and others have to have AA? What's the reason for that? Good question. And it is a very good question, and it's quite obvious that that's true. Most of us know of, or have heard of, our families have called more attention, people who used to drink terribly, you know, are now sober and doing something with their life. And even when Bill Wilson wrote this book, he knew there was people who seemed to be able to get sober, didn't need this stuff. And he didn't know how to describe them, but he knew how to describe us. So again and again throughout the book he says, alcoholics of our type. He doesn't say what the other types are, but there's alcoholics of our type. And nobody can really understand it because it's quite obvious. There are people who are apparently alcoholics, and when their security is threatened sufficiently, either maybe a loss of a job, or their family leaves them, or a death in the family, or something, they suddenly realize and they say, I quit! To hell with this! And they don't ever drink again. Then there are other people who seem to be mentally and physically addicted, and they are the people that treatment centers were originally set up to help, because they needed medical withdrawal. And at each step of their withdrawal, they're pointing out what's happening to them, and they get off, they say, hey, man, I'm off of this stuff. This is ruining my life. Now, there aren't very many of these people, but there's enough of them to make an impact. By far, the most numerous type of alcoholic are alcoholics of our type. Alcoholics of our type are characterized, we're very similar to the others. We drink, and perhaps our security is threatened by the loss of a job, or a family leaving, or a death in the family, or something that really threatens my security, and I quit! But sooner or later, I must always begin to drink again. Or I go to a treatment center and get medically withdrawn, and I've learned my lesson, and I pray for forgiveness, and I quit. but sooner or later, I'd drink again. And we are the type of people who baffle science and baffle medical people and baffle religion and baffle our families and baffle, there goes a couple of them now. Baffle people. We baffle people, and most of the people in this room have had that experience. I'm sure I've had it a number of times. I'm sure some of you have had it. Of having your family or someone close to you say, "Oh, how could you? You were starting to do good again, and the children were back, and you had your job, and now you've ruined it all again. How could you?" Or variations of that. I've heard that, and I'm sure you've heard it too. And they act as though I know an answer, and I don't know an answer, and I'm baffled and frustrated and angry. So my only answer to that is, leave me alone, God damn it, leave me alone. Because I don't know the answer. And that's the type of alcoholic that through centuries has baffled people and created heartache and left a swath of destruction. And as baffling to themselves as they are to the people around them. Now, I didn't have a chance to give a big answer like that to the guy because he didn't want a big answer like that. I just had to tell him, well, there are some people who seem to be able to stop drinking when their security is threatened, and a great many are not. And the sad thing is the many who are not begin by thinking they're the ones who can. I was reading chapter 3 tonight. All of us have come to think we can handle this or find a way to beat it. And people of our sort are driven to the wall because we haven't found a way to treat it. Then he asked me another interesting question. He said, okay, the people that go to AA, how come some of them can stay sober and some of them can't? Because they're all hearing the same thing. And that's really true. If you've been here very long, you know that to be accurate. If this front row here, these 10 people or so, all were newcomers tonight at their first meeting, and they went to the same meetings, had the same sponsor, read the same book, did the same things, in a couple of weeks, a couple of them would be gone. Pretty soon a couple more would be gone. Maybe at the end of the year, a couple will be here to take a birthday cake. And no one could tell which one of the two would be here. Sometimes the one that seems to be most earnest are the ones that are gone, and the ones that are sullen and bitter stay around and are transformed. Who can explain that? How do you explain such a thing? Why do some people stay sober and some people don't in the same program? And when I'm trying to give them an answer, I had to think about my own life. I hate pain. I am a hedonist of the first water. I hate physical pain and I hate mental pain. And so I have to wonder why, after being in great pain and being brought to Alcoholics Anonymous, why did I slip year after 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 year? The worst years of my life came after I came to Alcoholics Anonymous and good people tried to help me. And for a while I was a kind of a high bottom drunk, and then I was a medium bottom drunk for a few years, up and down, and finally at the end, the last day I drank, two guys threw me out of a Skid Row mission and said, "And stay out of here, you damn bum." Now I tried to explain to them, I'm not a bum. 3 years ago I was on the faculty of the University of Texas. Ads that I helped write, the old L.C. Nelmer ads for the Borden Company, were running that very week in Life and Time and Saturday Evening Post. I've had my picture in the New York Times for one of my achievements. How many people do you know have had their picture in the New York Times for one of their achievements? But it's hard to explain these things in midair. I stood outside of that damn old mission on a cold morning in October, late October, end of October, raining slightly, sick, desperate. I had a terrible feeling. I didn't know anybody in Los Angeles, one person I guess. I had a terrible feeling. I didn't know what that feeling was, so later I heard it, the guy telling me in his inventory. He explained that feeling. Oh, that's the feeling I had. And it's the feeling I'm sure many people in this room have had, because you don't have to be on Skid Row. I've seen guys who are still making $1 million a year have the same feeling. The feeling that there is no friendly direction. There's no direction. If you follow it far enough, there's going to be someone laughing and happy to see you. You just have burned. Oh, here comes that son of a bitch again. And they may not say it, but you see it in their eyes, and we all know that sight. And I stood out there, and I thought, this can't be happening. This must be a dream. Pretty soon my wife's going to shake me and say, "Clancy, come on, you're kicked off all your covers. Get up and go to work." But it wasn't, and I just didn't know what to do. If some old guy would come up to me that morning and said, "Hey, Slim, you know you're dying. You're down to 120 some pounds. You've lost your wife and children. You'll never see them again. You've lost your career. You used to be considered a boy genius, the guy said. Now you can't even get a job washing dishes. You've lost all your clothing except what you got on. Apparently lost it in Phoenix when they arrested you and threw you in jail where the guy kicked your teeth out. And I knew that happened because my lips were swollen and my gums were bleeding. And you've lost your home. You have no place to go. You're an only child, and your mother's no longer allowed to accept phone calls from you up in northern Wisconsin because your stepfather's so tired of watching you calling her up and manipulating her and give her a sad story to get a few more bucks. Now, you've been going to AA off and on for 10 years, and you think you're awful smart. And you never thought AA was enough for you because you spent your money in psychoanalysis like many, discovered things and understandings. Why don't you just, for God's sakes, go back to AA one more time and admit you're an alcoholic, something you've never done? And if a guy said that to me, and if I'm in a mood to be honest, which I may or may not have been, I'd have had to say, it isn't the way it looked, pal. It isn't the way it looks. I know I look terrible, but I'm not really an alcoholic. Not really. I know there's something wrong with me. I know there's something wrong with me since I was a little boy. I'm not quite good enough somehow, and I get afraid a lot. And there's something missing in me. I don't know what's missing in me, but people get close to me and they apparently can spot it. They don't tell me what it is. But when people get close to me, they apparently don't like me very much anymore. I've never been able to successfully maintain any kind of relationships of any kind with anybody to speak of. I found out later why that was. And you may be having some trouble with your relationships. And if you're the way I was, insecure and frightened and lonely and different, I discovered that when you're that way, approval, you have very little or no self-approval. So whatever approval you have has to come from outside. And so all I ever ask of people who I belong to a relationship with, or a close relationship, all I ask of you is just treat me special all the time. I don't consciously do it, but I did it again and again. Because if you start treating me special, I feel average. If you treat me average, I feel rejected. When you start treating me special, I'm gone. Average, I'm gone. So I'll reject you before you reject me. I'm going to protect myself. But I didn't know what to tell. All I knew is that everything I was like a reverse Midas effect. Everything I touched turned to crap. Somehow, and I don't know why, all I ever wanted to be was a good guy. And I spent thousands of dollars in psychoanalysis. And I discovered reasons why I was this way. It made me feel better. You know, I discovered I'd been repressed as a child by the Norwegian Lutheran Church. You talk about the Holocaust, let me tell you what this was tough. I discovered a lot of things. I read books, I read Nietzsche, I loved Nietzsche, you know, our German philosopher. And I just loved, because he was such a cynic and he knew the establishment was rotten and he just attacked them. And I really identified with him. It really hurt me when I discovered he died in the insane asylum. So I studied a little more closely. I discovered he really wasn't crazy. He had syphilis. He was just a good time guy like me, that's all. Well, when you're a Norwegian Lutheran, there aren't very many good times either, I'll tell you. I think I mentioned this the last time I was here, but I might as well tell you again, because I'd like to hear it. I'm getting older now. I turned 70 a couple of years ago, and I'm still in good shape, and I play ball, and I still do things. I feel good, great. Still go to work every morning. But when you turn 70, you have a feeling you are on the home stretch, no matter how you slice it. Just, every day you look in the obits, and am I in that some bitch? But my doctor started giving me iron tablets when I was 70, and that's kind of made me feel better. And then a few months ago, because I'm just a human being, I tried a Viagra. And I had no idea if you're taking iron tablets, you're not supposed to take Viagra. And now every 4 hours I face north. Well, but anyway, there's a guy where I work who even more coarse than I am. He says, I just take an eighth of a Viagra every morning. I said, why? What good is that? He says, keeps me from peeing on my shoes. But all my life I've been trying to find the equalizer, and the equalizer I found out when I was 15 years old. I ran away from home because nervous and upset and irritable, early in the Second World War, and I hitchhiked to San Francisco, a skinny little guy, pimply-faced, dumb, lied my age. Guy showed me how to do that. Got seaman's papers without any kind of a test. And the day I got to San Francisco, I was on a ship going to the South Pacific. And on that ship, I think about that sometimes, and I'll tell you something. It makes you... You can't hardly pick up the paper today. Today on the plane reading about children being molested by adults of various kinds. We just arrested a janitor in Los Angeles this morning for molesting a bunch of 10-year-olds. All of us, you just go down all... I don't know if it always goes down all the time or what. But I look back and I think, I hitchhiked all the way across the country, dumb little kid, got on ship with the scum of the earth, all the good guys that go in the Navy. These were the scum, filthy, rotten, dirty people. Many of them Catholic, I might say. Or so I was led to believe by my grandmother. And I never was molested once. It makes you feel unattractive. Anyway, on that ship, one of the things that happened to me, some guys got me to take a drink of whiskey, and I didn't want it because I really was raised in a strict religion. I didn't want it. But they intimidated. They didn't intimidate. How about you, Junior? You think you're man enough for a little snort? Yes, I am. I took a drink, and it made me throw up, and they laughed at me, and I hated that. So, you know, I don't know, to this day, I don't know any feeling that's worse than public humiliation. You know, it's just terrible. I just felt so bad. And these guys, I couldn't hit them. I thought I had a gun, I'd have shot them. I thought later, one thing I might have done, I'm glad I didn't think of it. I went and said, hey, you, lean over. Yeah. Take that. You just give one in the old eye. But all the way across the Central Pacific, every day when nobody's around, I'd sneak in that bottle and take a drink of it. I just hated it. I just throw up. I'd have to wipe it up. We were coming into Pearl Harbor, and they're still digging up the ships. And I was down there the day before my 16th birthday. I remember that, and I was down there taking a drink of that crap. And it stayed down. And then I couldn't breathe. Oh, God, what am I going to do? Then all of a sudden, something strange happened. I found myself feeling significantly better. And that was the first time in my life I ever felt the way men looked. It was a great feeling. A couple of days later, they took me to Pearl or Honolulu and filled me full of beer and got me drunk, and I threw up, but it was fun. And I didn't become a raging alcoholic. As when you're a teenager, you go through those rites, you know. On that ship, nobody in my family smoked. They all smoked. So I smoked and puked and smoked and puked. The one day I smoked and didn't puke. I learned how to lust effectively. I mean, don't misunderstand me. Even at the age of 15 in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, I'd had sex. But I'd been apprehensive, and I'd been afraid, and I'd been alone. And these guys taught me you could do it with people. And later on, I went on another ship in the Aleutian Islands, got a little less dumb, and then I went in the Navy. At the end of the war, then it was up in Northern California, in a hospital being sewed together, and they passed around some tests. I wasn't good on tests. They gave me a high school diploma, because I'm still a junior in high school in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. And after the war, I went to college, first class of veterans, 1946. I don't know if anybody here is old enough to remember that. But that really was exotic, because only time in American history, millions of people all got out of college or got out of the service, and they all had the GI Bill. And a lot of them went to college just for something to do for a while. And so the colleges were jam full, and they were renting buildings. And you'd go to a freshman English class, and there'd be some hard, grizzled old Marine sergeant, about 50, sitting next to some little honey just out of Plum Bum High School. Were you in the war? Yeah, do you put out? Yeah, just terrible. Sometimes they said yes. Well, but I got married in college. I met this girl with black hair, and I didn't even care she was a Catholic, and my grandmother went into a fit about it, but I loved her. And I went out in the world. I became a sports writer. I was thinking about that last weekend. I was at the 50th reunion of my graduating class up in Wisconsin, and I was so happy to see a lot of those people looking bad. Looked old and feeble. And I'm doing good. But some of them looked better than I did. It hurt me a lot. But anyway, it is amazing to go back to your 50th college reunion, because some of these kids, one was owned a big stockbroking firm in New York, one had been Undersecretary of Defense, and these boobs, you know, it just seems so funny that these kids at But anyway, I went out in the world. I became a sports writer. My wife began having children like Catholic women do, just incessantly. I began a national career dropping little Catholics all over the world here. So I had to get better jobs. I got into advertising and public relations. I did some good jobs. And all these years I drank, and all these years I worked. And I drank too much sometimes. They sent me to AA briefly. AA had no answer for me when I was a young man. I was 22 when I went to my first meeting, and that doesn't seem very young in AA now, but then no one had heard of anybody within 20 years of it in that state. And I don't know what they said, but I'm sure if you're new tonight, you think you're hearing us at some of the meetings, you know. Just seemed to me they said things like, I stayed drunk around the clock for 20 years. One day I walked through that door. They told me to put the plug in the jug, and I did. And I've just never been so goddamn happy. But I went to AA from then on, off and on, because I did drink quite a bit, and I got in trouble. And I went to psychoanalysis. I did a lot of things, but I always knew if I could just find the thing that would change that balance within me, that imbalance I always felt. And the imbalance seemed to be getting worse as I went along. And I didn't know what to do with it. I tried everything I knew within power, because I never wanted to be a bad guy. I don't think very many people do. But unfortunately, people like me seem to have two speeds, very good and to hell with it. And you stay as good as long as you can, and then to hell with it. You stay bad as long as you can, and then you got to get good. There's just never any rest anywhere. And little by little, I went to hell. And one morning, I found myself standing in front of a Skid Row mission, and there was no explanation for it. And it was raining, and I wanted to get out of the rain, and I knew that someone had told me someone had dropped me off there a couple of days before. I had been in town about a week or two, of an AA club. And I know if you go back to around those AA clubs, you can hustle them a little bit sometimes, because they're simpletons, to like catch a break somewhere. And I walked out to this club. It was 72 blocks. That's a long way in the rain. I found out where it was. And I got there, it's the same old crazed fanatics and their steps and their meaningless, turn your life over to God, work the steps, do the thing. I know very few things more tedious to an intelligent, non-alcoholic slipper than being surrounded by AA fanatics. Jesus, they're a terrible bunch. And I hung around there, and at night they had a meeting. I ate about 8 pounds of cake, that's all there was. I have no teeth. And I went to this meeting, somebody talked about gratitude, and I almost puked it back up. And that night they let me sleep in an abandoned car in their parking lot in the garage. Isn't that something? 5 years ago, I'd have hired and fired these pukes, and now they're putting me in an abandoned car. Someday I'll be on top, and I'll come back and buy this club, and I'll have their ass. I'll tell you. The next morning I went in there having a spiritual meeting. I almost puked again. And it just went on for days. It kept raining. I thought, my God. I thought, maybe I'm dead. Maybe my grandmother's right. This is hell for marrying a Catholic. Just day after day of people telling me about the program. And I had no idea that would be my sobriety, because I didn't want it to be, had no intention for it to be. And I've often thought, as Minnie told us tonight, what happened, the moment of truth for her, kneeling by her bed after trying many of these things. And I'll tell you, there are authorities in AA. I'll tell you who authorities are. They are people who come from far away. When we have conventions in California, we bring people from New York and Virginia and Florida. When they have conventions in New York, they bring people from California, even from Las Vegas. I'm kind of a minor authority in Toronto. I go there every year, and every morning, on this one day on Saturday, I talk on something like the history of AA or the traditions or some other dull subject. In the afternoon, there's a question and answer session. Then at night, I tell my story. And of all those things I like to do, I think I like the question and answer part better, because I've found out that I seem to have a natural facility for weaving a tapestry of verbal BS while I think of the answer. A few years ago, I was out there talking, and one of the guys says, Clancy, I have a question. If you don't mind, I wouldn't like one of your long answers. I thought somebody ought to go back and slap her. I didn't say it. She said, every year we hear about how long you slipped and how terrible it was, and how long you've been sober and how wonderful it is. What was the difference? What was the dividing line? What happened? Just tell me in a sentence or two, if you will. You can't answer that in a sentence or two. That's ridiculous. That's just stupid. I didn't say this either. I said, it's a rather complex topic to do that. I thought to myself, I'd like to find out where you live and come over and smash your face. Because it threw off my rhythm. I said, I'll have to think about that. That night I was taking a shower before the meeting, and the answer came. At least an answer came, and I didn't like it as a crazy, goofy little answer. I like answers that have a little body, a little panache, a little zip. I'd like to have the newcomers tonight leave and say, did you hear what Clancy said? Wet birds don't fly at night. Yes, but did you hear what he said after that? Never mind if the horse is blind. Keep loading the wagon. Now, these answers mean nothing, but they give the newcomer hope. Yeah. The answer I thought of in that shower was, this was the first time I did things that I thought were demeaning and stupid and beneath me. And I didn't do it because I wanted sobriety. I did to hang around that club so I wouldn't have to leave there till I could get on my feet. And I found somehow my resistance was down. I mean, for example, we have styrofoam cups here. In those days, nobody had styrofoam cups. Everybody had porcelain cups. So after every meeting, they had to wash dishes. Because you without the teeth, would you wash dishes tonight? If I had any zip left, I'd say, no, I don't want to wash dishes tonight. Wash this. Yeah. But I found myself saying, all right, yeah. You want to help clean up the hall? I felt like Quasimodo if they're going to tell me to ring the bell next. I lived in an abandoned car and I hung around that club, and when you do that, then eventually I stayed sober for a few days. Then that's a great involved group. Better get a sponsor. Better get a sponsor. And I'd had sponsors. Now, if you're new tonight, let me warn you. Sponsors all seem so nice and pleasant, but they will eventually stick their nose in your business. And I used to see this movie actor come in. He was a character actor, and he always played loving roles. And I thought, I'll get some money from this old jerk, and I'll get out of town, get some front teeth, get the clothes, get back to an advertising agency, and make my move. And I said, Bob, would you be my sponsor? He said, yeah, but I want you to do what I say. Sure, Bob. I want sobriety on an all-time basis. I look back, he should have won the Academy Award for every loving role he ever played, because they were foreign to his nature. He was a right-wing fascist AA pig, just the worst of it. I used to wonder, why would I take crap like that from this guy? Because I never took crap from anybody. That's my stock and trade all of my adult life. Don't give me any crap. I don't know how big jobs, big advertising agencies. Somebody gives me some crap. Get yourself another boy. I'm gone. I don't know how many nights in bars. People say, you don't seem to be so much. You don't think so, son of a bitch? Try me. And I get knocked on my can a lot. But they know I'm tough. After I was sober, I wondered why I always had to be so defiant. It took me a long time to understand that. You know why? Because all my life I secretly knew that I was a weakling, and I hate it. I despise being a weakling inside, and no one's ever going to find out if I got to fight every night, if I got to quit jobs, whatever I got to do. You're not going to find out I'm a weakling. And the odd thing about AA is this: you stay here long enough and do some of this junk, and eventually you become strong. And then you can afford to be weak. But you can't afford to be weak when you're weak. Funny paradox. But why would I take that crap? Because he was the first person I ever met that seemed to understand what I felt. He would tell me things. I say, yes, I know what I believed that he knew how I felt. Now, what difference would that make? The difference is what makes Alcoholics Anonymous work. I've been getting advice in all my life. But it's just information, because I know you don't know what the hell you're talking about. You may for you and people like you, but not for me. I have problems you don't even understand. And this guy seemed to know how I was feeling. And therefore, what he told me was no longer just information, it was advice. And begrudgingly, I'd try little bits of it, and little bits of it. And instead of running away, I'd get little jobs, and he would give me ways to... I finally got a little job when I was 2 years sober that I kept for a while as a writer. I've been a busboy and a dishwasher and just a lot of things. Got a little job back in my field and almost didn't last. But he taught me some of the great spiritual lessons of Alcoholics Anonymous. You know what some great spiritual lessons are? Prayer and meditation, certainly. But I'm telling you some others. Do what you said you would do. Be where you said you would be when you said you would be there. Don't take out your hostility on people who can't answer back. Children, waiters and waitresses, kids, employees. On days you know you're having a bad day, watch that damn mouth, because you can just cut people and ruin relationships and never know what happened. And on and on. And I didn't learn them well, but I learned enough to hold that job. And when I was sober 4 years, I finally got some front teeth. But nobody in that medical corporation didn't know I didn't have front teeth. I carried my lip like this for 2 years. They thought I'd been burned in a fire, I guess. When I was 5 years sober, I was director of advertising for that corporation. When I was 7 years sober, another guy and I were brought into Hollywood. We created something called Boss Radio. Became the #1 hard rock station in the world. We all wore shiny suits and said things like, "What's coming on down, baby?" But you get sick of pimping to teenagers. When I was 10 years sober, I was downtown doing public relations for oil companies. 15 years sober, I was a marketing director in Beverly Hills. When I was 5 years sober, the same wife and children heard the crinkle of green in my wallet all the way to Dallas. Leaped out of their post office box, rushed to my side. 9 months and 10 seconds later, another Catholic hit the street. And now they're all grown up. The youngest one is 35, I guess 36. And they've all, 3 of them are 11 years sober this year in AA. Only one of my kids has gone bad. She's down in Albuquerque, and she's become a district attorney. All I ever wanted was a public defender or two. It's all very nice. And so if you're new tonight, I know we had some new people over here in their first 30 days. Where were they? There you are, sir. I want to tell you 2 guys something that'll cheer you up. I live out in the west side of LA now. I own a home. I'm doing fine. I want to tell you one thing. I've got it all together, and you haven't. But I know you're happy for me. That's what counts. I didn't say that. I didn't really say that to embarrass you. I do, because I really have affection for you. I really do. But I want to explain something to you. I'm going to give you a 5-minute talk, then I'm going to sit down. I guess I got 5 minutes. Everything I've told you is true up to now. And I'm going to tell you some more truth, but this was an introduction. I'm going to give you a 5-minute AA talk. The most important thing I said tonight, guys, and the young lady behind you, and nobody paid any attention to, I said, my name is Clancy Immisland, and I'm an alcoholic. You may think about that later. When did that old fool become an alcoholic? He was an alcoholic when he drank. He was an alcoholic when he got sober. When did he become an alcoholic? Now, people like me, and perhaps like you, know we can't be alcoholics, because my problem really isn't alcohol. It is when I'm drinking too much, no question about that. But it really isn't the problem. I have holes in me that nobody understands, and feelings of deficiencies and inadequacies and fears and lonelinesses that psychic, that sometimes are compounded when I'm in the middle of crowds. How do you explain that to anybody? I was glad that I survived around here doing these stupid actions and trying to please my sponsor. I didn't have any idea. I didn't want to return to God or find AA or nothing. I was just trying to please that sponsor. I got into a kind of just giving up and doing... And I stayed sober long enough somehow not to let a guy let me sleep on his sofa in the basement of his house, and I wasn't. And long enough to discover the most important thing, one of the great things I've ever learned. This book, Alcoholics Anonymous, I had read it twice. I finally discovered it says that my problem is not alcohol. If I'm an alcoholic, my problem is not alcohol. I thought, how can that be? Everybody knows the problem is alcohol. In fact, if your problem is alcohol, you're in the wrong place. You don't need us. If your problem is alcohol, you're home free. And you think, well, that's crazy. That doesn't even make sense. People say, of course the problem is alcohol. I can disprove that in 5 seconds. If the problem is alcohol, detoxes turn out recovered people. And they don't. Treatment centers turn out recovered people. Hospitals, jails, they turn out sober people with varying amounts of information what may be wrong with them. But I'll guarantee you, if they be like me or of our type, guys, you will discover sooner or later, unless something dramatic happens after that, sooner or later you will always drink or sedate. Well, if the problem isn't alcohol, what is it? Is this something like Scientology or something we have to keep getting videos and tithe and so on? No, not at all. You guys and everybody in this room knows what's wrong with it, but you don't know you know it. The problem here is something called alcoholism. That's the same thing. Alcoholism, not the same thing. It is imperative you learn that different. The day will come, if you're of our type, where your sanity and survival of life will depend on remembering the difference. So what's the difference? I kind of want to know that then. Well, I could talk about that for 2 hours. I did once in Cape Town, South Africa, just to punish him. Soon thereafter, they overthrew the white governors. Well, anyway, let's put it in one sentence for tonight. An alcohol problem is overcome by stopping drinking and cleaning up your act. However, in this strange thing called alcoholism, this mind-consuming, perception-distorting, bodily eroding, and which, sadly for you and me, looks exactly the same as other kind, eventually fatal thing called alcoholism. You'll discover sooner or later, if you haven't discovered it yet, that stopping drinking and cleaning up your act has no significant long-term effect on your life other than to gradually make it so painful you can't stand it. That is what makes alcoholism a fatal disease, because the recovery from it is more fatal than the indulgence. Now, even that doesn't make you an alcoholic. That just makes you very emotionally borderline. One other thing must be present. In every generation that they have been able to study, and nobody knows why to this day, but 7 or 8 or 9% of people who drink get an unnatural reaction to alcohol. So that begs the question again, well, what's this unnatural reaction? Makes you stay drunk all the time? No, that's podium. No human body can stay drunk 2 weeks in a laboratory. One of the rotten parts about being a drinker, you keep getting sober again and again and again. Makes you act crazy. We get all these speakers. And then I escaped from Sing Sing and raped 4 nuns at Menninger Clinic. And then, you know, some people do that. But I see people die today from alcoholism who never acted crazy once. They die in front of me and never acted crazy once. So what is it? It's something I never would have thought of in 10,000 years, because I wouldn't have conceived this. What does alcohol do to me that it doesn't do to my wife and do to my mother and father? Nothing. It does less to me. I can drink them all under the table consecutively. What it does something special for me that it doesn't do for most people. And I never guessed that, because it does something special for you, but you have no way of knowing that because you have nothing to compare it against. It's like somebody saying to you, how do strawberries taste to you? I don't know. It tastes like strawberries. I don't know how to compare it. What does alcohol do for me, people of our type? It almost instantly changes my perception of reality. It almost instantly makes me taller and more self-contained, and them smaller and less frightening. It almost instantly fills holes that nothing else does. And that's why I drink. It makes me feel the way men look. If someone saw me stand outside that mission that morning and said, why do you drink? I'd have given them psychoanalytical reasons for 2 days. The one answer I wouldn't have given them is because it makes me feel the way men look. And if it does this for you, and I'll guarantee you, it's better than anything you'll ever have. People are talking to me about narcotics. Oh yeah, I'm an addict. I know all about addicts. We're really tough. I'm an alcoholic and an addict. I've been working with addicts for over 25 years. I think I know more about addiction than most addicts. I'm not an addict, but I know quite a bit about it. I know about heroin and the great euphoria they get to. And eventually they can't get it anymore, so they have to overdose. Heroin addicts always overdose. That's what they die from, overdosing. Got to be continually walked off. And eventually they get so desperate they'll go to a hospital and kick the drugs and get their body clean so they can get that juice again. Cocaine, that makes it omnipotent, just everything's wonderful. And eventually you get, now the new thing on the streets is crack cocaine, of course, that terrible stuff that they just cheap, but it doesn't last long, but it gives you such a high. And as soon as you're just off this one, got to go do it again. And it's just euphoric. And they have one drawback, it's a speed drug, and all speed drugs have the same side effect, growing paranoia, terrible addiction, terrible feeling, until finally you can't say, your body's going, and alcohol doesn't do that. get the last stages, it gets kind of bad. But for a long time, alcohol just puts me where I want to be. Sometimes I drink too much. And people say, oh, your problem is drinking. I think, maybe it is. I'll quit drinking, but it isn't drinking. It's the people that are screwing me around is my problem. And little by little. Now, you wouldn't think that'd make much difference, but today in America, where there's more sobriety than anywhere else in the history of the world, it is estimated in America today that about 95% of alcoholics still die drunk, or as a direct result of drinking. And I'm sure they all die saying the same thing, one form or another, but I'm not really an alcoholic, you see. My problems came when I was sober. These are real problems. I just drank to get some relief and got a lot of hand. And they don't realize they're just defying the disease of alcoholism. And that's why getting sober doesn't make it better. And that's why AA is so important, turns out. Because the concept of Alcoholics Anonymous, its actions, its involvements, its people, is not to make you more and more sober. By the time you're 30 days sober, you're going to be as physically sober as you're going to be for the rest of your life. The purpose of AA, I've come to believe, much to my surprise, because I've seen it happen to myself and countless others. The purpose of AA is to very slowly do what alcohol does fast. Alcoholics Anonymous, over a period of time, has changed my perception of reality. It has filled a lot of the holes inside of me, as much as alcoholic holes, not human holes, because nobody fills those. It has enabled me to live with some degree of dignity in the world that I would have bet my life was full of hatred and anger. I got close to people in my family that I hadn't talked to in 10 years because I had to make amends to them. And after that, I got to love them. The hard problem was coming to return to God. My sponsor had to finally point out to me, you don't have to return to God. You got to come to believe in something. I said, I can't believe in God. If God exists, I'm damned. Because I know what God is, and I know what I've done. I've broken all 10 commandments, and there's no chance. In fact, it wasn't until 2 or 3 years later I realized I hadn't broken all 10 commandments. I've never coveted my neighbor's manservant. But yet. But he said, can you believe in me? I said, yes. He said, I'm your new higher power. And he became my higher power. People laughed at that. Said, there's a guy who thinks his sponsor's God. I didn't think he was God. I just thought he was a power greater than me that seemed to care for me. And I'll tell you this, if you're new, I would much rather see you believe in your sponsor than you believe in, than to pretend to believe in a God that you don't believe in. Because you can fool him at 8 o'clock at night, but you can't fool that dark at 2 in the morning, I'll tell you that. You better have something you can turn to. And little by little, I came to believe in a God that loves me, much to my surprise. I prayed to that God earnestly every day for the last 40 years. Who would have thought such a thing? But all of that is just even secondary, having a family, whatever it might be. What a concept. There's a name for what's wrong with me. Many described it. Our first speaker described it. It is something that, it isn't the alcohol, it's what makes me drink alcohol and what alcohol does for me when I drink it. And nothing I will ever do will enable me to drink alcohol. That stupid goddamn thing on the television last week, but I'm not judging it. But if you saw it, a whole program in 2020 designed how alcoholics can drink again if they just do it right. None of them ever know that we're not drinking for the alcohol, we're drinking for the feeling. And if I get the feeling, nothing's going to make it any better than that. But little by little, you come to live with some degree of dignity, to walk with some degree of dignity. The last thing I want to tell you is that sometimes you make a bum decision. I've made a lot of them, and you can't hardly explain. When I was about 15 years sober, I was a marketing director in Beverly Hills. My family came back, and everything was fine. And one day, in a fit of misjudgment, I left that job at Beverly Hills, and for the last 26 years, I run the mission on Skid Row that threw me out in 1958. And people say, why would you want to give up your career to run that damn mission? And I've never thought of a good answer to that. Well, it was such a significant decrease in salary, I thought it must be spiritual. It isn't a treatment center. We're way below that. We're just trying to keep people alive. When I get out of my car in the morning, I step over the bodies of dying men and women to get to my office. And this afternoon when I went to the airport, I stepped over the bodies of a dying man and a dying woman to get here. You think, how could you do such a thing? Because you do it for a long time, and I see myself lying there, and there's nothing I can do. They say, well, where's God's grace? God's grace is present, in my opinion, for everybody. But I got to extend myself to get it. And that's what AA teaches me, to take the actions that make it right. The last thing I want to say, sometimes AA doesn't seem as though it understands. It isn't therapeutically sound because they don't seem to understand the nature of my emotional feelings. It's as though I'll say I'm out of balance. I'm born, I suppose we're born like this. But in my life, I've been more and more out of balance. It's like there's a big, heavy black thing growing on this side. And I just fight it. And when I drink, it makes the scale go away. And it's just wonderful. But then it comes back and it's a little bit more. And it's just pretty soon you just, oh my God, nobody understands. And you go to AA and say, what do I do? Look who I am. They say, well, we're just going to ignore that big thing on your scale. What are you talking about? It's killing me. No, we have a different solution. We have a little bucket here called actions and a little spoon. We're going to work on this side. There's nothing wrong with this side. It's this side. Just do it. And eventually, if you do it long enough, that damn scale starts to move. And if you do it long enough, you're in balance. Nothing you will ever do will change this side of the scale, but you can balance it again. And it's just wonderful. That's when you go through, oh, I'm so happy in my program. I've found love and understanding. It's just but through some celestial prank, there's a little tiny hole on this side. You just get that baby in balance. Oh, I'm so happy. Oh, Jesus Christ. Yeah. Yeah. And that's what we're asking you to do. You guys, you new guys, you got a lot of scrubbing to do, but after you're here a while, it isn't quite so much. But you take the actions. You say yes to requests. You go to meetings. You make yourself available. Someday you show your gratitude by helping others. Not show your gratitude, get your gratitude by helping others. This book says action is the magic word. This book says when all else fails, work with another alcoholic. What for? To be good? Nah. So when you walk out of these rooms, you walk into a world that's not fearful to you. You can walk straight. You don't have to be afraid of meeting anybody in the world with a little degree of dignity. And you can thank your lucky stars that you found Alcoholics Anonymous. Thank you.